transferring you through to the Information Commissioner's office. How can I help?
Yeah, I've got some concerns about the manner in which the ICO office is being run.
Okay. Is there anything in particular that you'd like to discuss that I'll see what I can help with?
Yeah. So I've come to the conclusion that the fines that have been collected by the ICO are not shared, distributed back to the victims of the data breaches.
That is correct, yes.
So you regulate organisations, corporations. You collect fines based on information that you're given by victims of data breaches, and then you make a profit out of their breaches without compensating them or contributing to any compensation that they are entitled to.
Yeah, that's part of the legislation, is that the fines that we issue are effectively cycled back into our work as regulator, as opposed to compensation for individuals. If you want compensation, it is something that you are also entitled to pursue under the legislation. What you need to do is that needs to be handled, matters of individual compensation have to be handled separate from us. That's just in the legislation, I'm afraid.
Yes, so what advice do you give to data subject breach victims to how to get their compensation outside of your fines?
Okay, so if you go to our website, ico.org.uk,
Yep.
if you type in the top right-hand corner, there is a search bar if you're looking on a computer. What you want to do is type in court,
Yep.
and I believe it is the first page that comes up. It's titled Taking Your Case to Court and Claiming Compensation. Now, as I say, because in the legislation we have to be separate from the court, we have to be independent of this aspect of data protection legislation. That page is the only advice that we're able to offer, and anything else you would need to seek independent legal advice. You need to speak to a solicitor about sort of, merits of your case, what they think you should do to pursue it, things like that. Okay?
No, it's not okay. What about the conflict in your failure to regulate the organisations in the money that you collect from them? The more breaches there are, the more profit you make, and because you keep the money, the more you have a system whereby the more people report the breaches, the more profit you make, and the more the breaches continue.
So, I'm afraid I don't really know what to say to you here, because as a sort of arm's length agency, as a regulator, we don't actually make profit. There is no profit to be distributed. Any amount of money that we have goes into pursuing data protection regulation, our job as the regulator. It allows us to continue doing our work. I do understand that you believe that there's a sort of incentive for us to allow lax data protection practices based on the fact that we would then be able to issue more fines. But I'm afraid that's just not the case. What we do is we issue fines as a deterrent to organisations who, I'm sure you'd agree, don't want to be fined. Hence why it is a deterrent.
For example, you find DVLA for sharing information to third parties on vehicles. So vehicle recoveries, vehicle fines, basically vehicles have been stolen on grounds of this data breach to third parties by these bailiff companies. And you've not made public the DVLA fines, you've not stopped their practices as such. The councils are still stealing, still providing databases of breaches. There are illegal ANPRs, automatic number plate recognition, vehicles out and about. These are things that are still going on despite decades and decades of these breaches. So you've done nothing about it.
Right. Okay. So in terms of that, the only thing that I'm here on the phone able to advise you to do is, if breaches are still occurring, if you raise them to us, we can investigate those breaches and we can have a look at what's going on. In terms of making that DVLA fine public, that's not always something that we do. It is up to our discretion what we publish about the regulatory action we take. We don't publish information on every single decision that we issue.
So there's a problem. So you regulate DVLA. You know that DVLA has carried on breaching, and you have not made it public, so people are not aware that the councils are committing breaches even today. So you had an opportunity to stop it by making it public. You didn't make it public. People still don't realise it's wrong. They're still paying these fines to third parties. It's all still terrorism against the British citizens, and ICO is actually a participant in this terrorism.
Right, okay. What I would recommend you do is there is a form to submit complaints about us to look into, how we handle matters of data protection and how we, conduct ourselves in terms of what we publish and how we handle data rights concerns which are raised to us. I recommend you fill in that form and return it to us, at which point, we can look into it and see if there's anything that we can change. As well as that, obviously, the body which regulates us, the body that's in charge of us, is the Parliamentary and Health Services Ombudsman, or PHSO. And if you wanted to bring a complaint to them about us, you would be well within your rights to do so. I'd recommend you go to the PHSO website on information how to raise that concern about us.
Yeah, so are you a voluntary organisation?
No, we're an arm's length organisation that is effectively created by government, but we are not part of the government. That's why we're an arm's length organisation. We're a public body that is not officially part of the government.
So do you come under like a regulatory body, like you get professional, statutory and regulatory bodies, so you come under the regulatory body?
Yeah, we are a regulator.
So it's like a professional regulator, but you're regulating the data breaches by the corporations against the members of the public, where they're actually impersonating public services, but they're actually making profit, which the ICO is also doing the same as what the corporations are doing, which is breaching the data of the victims who are subject of data breaches, and then not giving them back anything in return for their information. It's a one-way information for you to make profit, but they get nothing. They don't get feedback. You don't make it public,
okay,
so there's a problem.
Okay, so as far as all that goes, again, we don't make profit. It's set down in the legislation how we have to handle our regulatory powers and what fines we can issue and where the money goes. That's in the legislation. If you wanted that changing, by all means, the best way to do so is to you'd have to get Parliament to change legislation. You'd have to discuss that with your Member of Parliament, that you believe as a member of the public that this system isn't working, that this system isn't fair, and that would be how that change comes about, because we are beholden to that parliamentary legislation. And in terms of sort of publishing those decisions, any individual concerned in a data breach case or a data rights concern that's been raised to us, if it's about their personal data, they are informed of the decision. They are, within their rights to make that public if they want. They can then, do what they like with that information. They can make as much noise as they like about it. They can get a public campaign going. That's well within their rights. They have all of this information available to them. We don't necessarily have to publish every single one of our decisions, and if a matter has gone to court, it is a matter of public record anyway.
Yeah, but courts don't make their proceedings transcripts public. That you have to ask for transcripts. They have to. They don't. I mean, it's another crime that there's no public transparency of any hearings in the UK. It costs a lot of money to get transcripts. But do you collect the transcripts where the data breaches, say the DVLA case? Do you have the transcript of that court case?
So if we were part of a court case, I would imagine that our legal team has been privy to that transcript. I would imagine if there has been a court case that we were part of, I imagine so. And you could make a Freedom of Information request to us for that transcript if you wanted it.
Okay, so I mean, like,
I suppose.
Would it not be? You use public interest, so surely that comes into consideration. If there is public interest, then you have to make it public. With the DVLA, can you tell me roughly how much they've been fined?
I can take a very quick look at the action we've taken and see if I can find the particular thing that you've referred to.
Thank you.
Do you have any idea when this particular fine would have been issued?
I saw it on your website, but then I didn't see the details of it. It said undisclosed amount unknown, probably about 3 years ago.
Right, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to search that in the normal way, because that's a while ago. Bear with me. So I'm afraid that there's a number of different decisions that we have made, that we have published about the DVLA that I would have to paw through. I can see just by looking for DVLA, there's 77 different things available for me to have a quick look at here to see if I can find what you're referring to. And I'm afraid that wouldn't be an appropriate use of this phone call for me to go through every single one.
So are the 77 just for DVLA, or are they the total amount numbers of breaches?
That is literally me searching DVLA.
Oh, so 77 occasions of complaints against the DVLA. So do you have the last date of the breach and the first date of the breach?
No, I'm afraid that this doesn't even necessarily relate to one breach. This doesn't necessarily relate to one case. They don't even necessarily refer to every case that we have with the DVLA or the only this one case in the beginning and the start of this. I'm afraid I just don't have the information you're looking for over the phone. What you would want to do is submit a Freedom of Information request to us. Our Information Access team will get back to you as soon as possible.
And what's the email for them?
Okay, bear with me. Let's have a quick look at making a Freedom of Information request. Okay, my apologies. It's just seeing if I can direct you to somewhere on our public website. Right, there we go. So what you want to do is email our Information Access team at ICO Access Information.
Yeah.
At ico.org.uk.
So ICO Access Information at ico.org.uk, yeah. And where could I find the 77 with the DVLA? Where would I have to go to find those?
So that is me right-hand corner of our website, DVLA,
Yeah.
which is where we publish the decision notices, and that shows the 27 results. Not 27, sorry, 77 results that come up when you search DVLA.
Right. Okay. All right. So you've got a new CEO there now.
So they're not a CEO; they are the Information Commissioner.
Yeah. Would you please? I mean, I would like you to. There's certain things I would like you to do, right? I mean, you need to record these calls. It says on there you don't record the calls. Is that correct? You don't record the calls.
Yeah, we don't record the calls, I'm afraid.
Because
this is an advice line.
Yeah, because you're a public body, you need to record the calls and you need to log the calls, because I record all my calls and I make all my calls public because I only deal with public matters, and this is public interest issue that I'm taking the time to inform you formally, and I will send this recording to the Information Commissioner if I could have his email.
Okay, so emailing the Office of the Information Commissioner is not likely to be the most useful way of sort of affecting change. As I did say, there are complaints forms that I can direct you to that you can fill out.
You see, my problem is you're self-regulating and you're making a lot of profit out of people's miseries. And what you need...
So we're not self-regulating, we're regulated by the PHSO, as I mentioned, and again, we do not make profit. We are not a profit-making organisation. Profit is not a thing that we make because there are no shareholders to divide profits amongst. We are a regulator. It's like the Treasury doesn't make profit. They are not a profit-making entity. That's not a thing that they do. They process funds in line with the legislation to go through and fulfil their remit as a public body.
Well, the only reason why the public would contact you is to actually as a deterrent, and you use the word deterrent, but there's no deterrent if the DVLA's got 77 breaches and they're still carrying on. The councils are still sharing people's personal details with third parties, bailiffs, and DVLA, so agents. You've had many years to sort this out, and you haven't actually made things better. You've made it worse, because the people are not aware that the DVLA are operating illegally. So what I was going to propose to your Information Commissioner was that I have a legal remedy for everybody who've had their data breached. And what I propose to do is to bring a writ of mandamus to a court to say that the ICO's office has failed to take deterrent action against DVLA, and that all fines collected from the DVLA by the ICO must be shared out to those people who've actually paid money for these breaches. They've actually had to pay £600 for a £30 speeding fine. They have to pay it on average £600 to get their vehicles back from these third parties. So the ICO has a liability, criminal liability. In some cases, these people have dropped dead, where they've been shocked at not having a vehicle, not being able to take their children to school, not being able to get their shopping. So the writ of mandamus would immediately say, here are the breaches, here is the ICO's failure to be a deterrent to the DVLA, and they have to stop. The councils must stop sharing people's data with bailiff companies. I mean, I've got a issue with my own council has breached my data.
So the way to bring that to us, for us to investigate it, is through the complaints form on our website. And I can direct you how to get there if you'd like.
Yeah, I can. I've got that. I've seen that. Yeah.
Okay, and that's the presumably this is a complaint about how the ICO handles data breaches. That's the make a complaint about us. Yeah.
Yeah.
You found your way to. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, that's where I would recommend you go and you submit that to us. And what will happen is that'll be logged on our back-end system and handled according to our procedures. As I say, we're not self-regulating. If you do have an issue with how we handle things, it would also be worth approaching the Parliamentary and Health Services Ombudsman. What we do is legislated for. We have to abide by the legislation, including the issue that you have with us not being able to give out compensation to individuals. That's legislated for. The best way to change that is to advocate with your elected representative and any other elected representatives in the UK that have a special interest in data protection matters and privacy matters, at which point they'd be able to advocate for changing the law for us to be able to give out individual compensation. That's just not the situation we're in at the moment.
No, so there's a conflict there because you have a law, which is the GDPR law, and it's been breached. The law has been breached, and there's evidence on your own website, the ICO's own website, that the DVLA has...
Yeah, but that is about... if your issue is about handing out individual compensation, that how we handle the money that is fined from organisations, how we handle that is the part that's set down in the legislation.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you take information, one-way traffic from victims of data breaches, and these could be councils. Councils have breached people's data en masse and given it to DVLA third parties who've gone and stolen people's homes, cars, children. It's the same breach that does all the property thefts. And then ICO has not really been a deterrent with the, say, for example, the DVLA 77 breaches. It's allowed the councils to continue those breaches. And the DVLA, I'd have to put them on a map, these 77 breaches, and I'd have to put the numbers, the amounts of the fines would have increased in time. So you're allowing these to continue because you're making more and more on the fines, and more, the more people that suffer, the more money you make, and that is a deception by the ICO against the people who are relying on you to become deterrents. There is no deterrent structure evident in the way that you're managing these fines.
Right, okay. And so you'd want to bring that to us via the complaints form.
So what I'm saying to you is that the Information Commissioner needs to know that there is a remedy for all the breaches of data, the victims to be compensated by yourselves. If you haven't collected the fines to cover people's compensation, then you need to increase the amount of fines, not for yourselves, but for the victims.
Yeah, you should put all that in the complaints form.
Yep.
And you will get a full response to it as appropriate, okay?
Okay, and I will be putting this audio recording with it as part of my complaint because I don't really want to have to repeat all that.
That's absolutely fine. Whatever evidence you feel is necessary for your complaint, then do feel free to attach that. I would recommend also adding in a sort of written account of the issue in your own words as well, just because it can be a little bit easier for the case officers to refer to. Might speed up the response that you get, just so you know. Yeah,
and I'm very grateful. You've been most professional, and you've been most helpful, and you've been most honourable. So I'm very impressed with the service I've received from you, And is it possible I could have your name?
Yeah, my name's Corey.
How do you spell that?
Corey.
Okay. And is it possible to know if you're running a call centre, a company call centre, or are you part of ICO?
So I'm employed directly by the ICO. Typically what happens with the public helpline is that there are a number of us who both work on the casework for data breaches and also give out advice. Obviously, both of those help sharpen our knowledge of data protection legislation and how we apply it in different ways, and sort of, it sort of feeds back into each other, where it lets us do our best work while we're handling sort of both of those things. But yeah, I'm employed directly by the ICO.
And are you like working from home at the moment, or is there an office where your call centre, or like do you work from an office?
So there is a head office in Cheshire
Okay.
that I would be working from at the moment. With the pandemic situation, I am working from home. We do have the option to do so. Obviously, current government guidelines are to work from home where you're able to.
Yes, absolutely fine. So thank you so much for your time and professional advice, and I will do my best to make sure that these crimes against the people do stop very soon. The councils themselves, do you have a list of the councils that have been fined?
So I don't believe we have a sort of searchable list of the actions we've taken divided up by sort of type of organisation, where you could like tick a box that says council and find all the decision notices we've published that refer to local councils. But if you put something along the lines of that into the complaints to us, I'm sure it'd be something that we'd look at the potential of to increase sort of the transparency of what we do, and if that's a feasible thing for us to do or not. I'm afraid sort of IT search forms aren't really my personal forte, so I can't comment on whether that would be a disproportionate amount of effort to the public benefit. But if you want to put that into the complaints form, as you would find it easier and more transparent to browse the action that we've taken. If such a sort of form fillable search function was available under the ICO, then absolutely put that in as part of your complaint, and I'm sure that whoever handles the complaint will look at it and handle it appropriately.
Would you have the phone number for the PHSO, sorry?
PHSO, I can take a quick look for you. Obviously, we're not actually associated with them as such, so I could just website. Yeah, so their helpline is 0345 015
Yeah.
4033.
Okay, and then it's other thing was, if the councils have breached the data of, say, children's services have breached data, should there be the data controller would be able to access if a parent, would a parent be able to access the data of a child that's in care?
Okay, so in terms of that would depend on the situation. So under the legislation, there is no distinction between a child's data and an adult's data. A child has the same rights as an individual over their data as an adult does. Now, what happens is we treat data of children sort of, as securely as we can. When a child would be considered able to understand their own rights as a data subject, that's when the parent would need permission to act on their behalf, as you would for any other adult person who understands their rights. If that parent had the appropriate permission, or if they had appropriate parental responsibility for a child that did not understand their rights, then they should be able to, liaise with us with very little difference to it being their own data, if that makes sense. So any information that we have to publish about that data, if they have the appropriate permissions or parental responsibility as applicable, they'd be able to look at it.
So say there's a learning disability child in care. The parents, natural parents, have equal rights to their data, to know where they live, who they live with, that as the
only
council...
if they have the appropriate parental responsibility. With children who've been taken out of the care of their parents, where they don't have parental responsibility, it is more of not a grey area, more of a situation by situation basis, where usually, as far as I understand it, there is some agreement between the council and the parent as to what access the parent will have to their child, and whether that access would, for example, be high enough, I suppose is the best way of phrasing it. If that access were high enough to basically demonstrate that they still had an appropriate parental responsibility, then they would still have that appropriate parental responsibility. But if they did not have parental responsibility or the child's permission, then it would be unlikely that they'd be able to have a look at that child's data.
So, for example, I've got a case of a child, 8-year-old boy in Scotland, who is in care, and he wants to be with his mother. She has now found out that somebody has given wrong information about him, and his registration of birth has been changed to a stillbirth. But she's not entitled to have any access. She doesn't know where, she doesn't have as much information about him, and he is being neglected and abused in care right now. So this is a typical kind of scenario whereby the councils take children in a breach of data, and then they abuse the children in a breach of data, and they have secrecy about the abuse in the data. So truly,
so in terms of the sort of practice of social care, in terms of how that is implemented, whether the social care is acting appropriately. There is also the local government and social care ombudsman who'd be able to look into the sort of social care aspects of it, where it gets a little bit more complicated. In terms of the actual data protection of it, that is a complicated situation which you are describing, where we would probably need to see a bit more information. We'd probably need to request some evidence from yourself or the person who you are describing, so that we could make an appropriate judgment on whether there is still the appropriate parental responsibility for that parent to be acting in terms of the data aspects of it. As I say, in terms of the social care aspect, which may be a more appropriate first call, especially where there is situations of abuse and neglect, that would probably be something, obviously, the local government and social care ombudsman, as well as the other relevant authorities, the police and so forth, would potentially be more appropriately able to act with the response that the situation demands where a child is being neglected, because our remit ends at data protection. We cannot go any further than that, which makes situations like these potentially more appropriate to go to other organisations first to solve the immediate issues, and then we, as the data protection regulator, can be sure everyone's personal data is being treated appropriately as well. if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. I was just thinking that if, say, the councils again are routinely making profit out of childcare services, which are totally unacceptable, of a very low standard, as in this case, I have other cases where children are at unknown locations. So say, for example, a little girl disappeared and they let the mother know, your child has gone missing, and this child is in care. So the mother's panicked, and then they found the child, and then they wouldn't tell the mother where the child, what happened. So, in that situation, you could get involved and tell the council that the mother does have a right to know. If they contacted the mother to say your child's gone missing, they had a right to let the mother know where the child was.
So if we were contacted with this as a data protection concern, and we were confident that the individual concerned did have the appropriate rights to the information that they were seeking, then we could get involved as the regulator to get them the personal data to which they were entitled.
Yeah. So if we're talking about precedences and deterrence, then surely there are hundreds of thousands of children in care that shouldn't be in care, and they've all done this through data breaches. It's like DVLA. There's hundreds of thousands of breaches there, and if the ICO was wanting to stop these breaches, because if the people start demanding that the fines collected over their cases, their own breaches, were their own property, that they were entitled to it, not the ICO, then there would be a change of policy by the government that clearly these laws are broken by these councils. If I say I've got say 10 occasions where my councils breached my data, have put me through terrorism.
So in terms of that, because we are an evidence-based regulator, we can only act on information which we have access to. So if there were, as you say, this sort of widespread mishandling of personal data for the gain of these organisations, we would have to be made aware of it, at which point we could begin investigations of our own through our enforcement teams and sort of our criminal able to act on that. But we would need the information first, so I would recommend that if individuals, that you are aware of have these concerns, that they bring them to us, and we can do our job as the regulator of personal data.
I lost you there for a couple of seconds, and I think I missed the flow of the point you were making just then. Could you just repeat that, please?
Yeah, basically, as an evidence-based regulator, we would only be able to act on information that we have access to. At which point, as you say, this widespread misuse of personal data exists within specific organisations. If that's not brought to our attention formally, we're not able to investigate it. But if it is brought to us, what we can do is investigate that, potentially as well as through our casework, through our enforcement teams and sort of criminal investigation teams, who can have a look into this and go through our role as the regulator and potentially take any appropriate action. But it would have to be brought to our attention first. We can't, unfortunately, sort of act on information that we don't possess.
So if I give you an example, I made a data subject access request to my council on the 9th of December. They have, on the 6th of December, written me an email treating it as a freedom of information and saying that I need to provide them with a proof of my passport, driving licence, signatures, address, and if I don't do that, they're going to write it off. So I did 3 requests. They've ignored the first 2. The third one, which I did the online DSAR, I did one as an email, 2 as emails. One is online, one is email, and one on their online DSAR. So they've disregarded the 2. The third one, they've treated it as an FOI.
So right, what you will have to do is you will have to bring those to us as formal concerns. I'm afraid I can't give you a judgment on them right now.
Yeah.
You would just have to bring this as a formal concern to us.
Okay, I'm going to email that right now. I've got it already. I've got the case prepared. So
okay, so the case you would want to bring if you go to make a complaint on the website to the your personal information concerns, that then is the start of the complaints form, which you would fill out as best you can, attach any evidence, send through to us. That would be handled by a case officer. That is a separate form to the one that I suggested you fill in previously for a concern about us and how we handle things. That is under the complaints and compliments about us. Submit a complaint about us. There's the information on submitting that complaint on that page there. Those are 2 separate forms, but I would recommend that you fill both of them out if you feel
sure.
able to.
So there's no way of doing it by email, no? Because sometimes I have problems uploading documents. I've got 4 PDF files.
So so 4 is the perfect number. As long as they are not in total above 10 megabytes.
Yep.
Because if they are in total above 10 megabytes, our system can have problems with accepting a message of that size all at once.
Right.
And if it is above 10 megabytes, what I would suggest you do is fill out the form.
Yeah.
Say that there is a separate, in the form there's a little bit for a summary. Obviously try and keep that as brief as possible. Again, the form has issues with larger submissions. And say, if you're not able to attach everything, and say that there's another email coming, and attach any remaining outstanding pieces of evidence, any outstanding files, to an email directed to ICO casework at ico.org.uk.
ICO casework at ico.org.uk. Yeah? Okay.
Yep. So, that needs to be under 10 megabytes in total. If you can't get everything in one email under 10 megabytes, I would suggest then further splitting it up and just saying this is email part 1 of 4, which is related to my case, so your name, case against name of organisation.
Yeah, sure. So I've got issues with courts as well. So courts having council tax liability order issued.
Yeah, again, it's all the same. If you've got a concern with how they're handling your personal data, then you want to submit that form to us. I would recommend submitting one form for each organisation, just so we can keep it separate, because ultimately we will have to separate them out into individual cases, and if they're separated out by yourself, it doesn't run the risk of us trying to sort of separate it once you've sent it in, and potentially missing something where maybe there's an overlap, or maybe where something is missed by pure human error, which, I'm sure you can appreciate happens. Everyone who works here is just a person as all. So if you have multiple complaints about different organisations, I would suggest splitting it into multiple emails, or multiple forms rather.
So it's the same procedure whether it's a third party that's been breached, and a public body breach. So I guess you deal the same way for all either public bodies or corporations, or they're treated the same?
In terms of the broad steps of the process, yes. Obviously, each organisation we do treat individually as appropriate. Some organisations we are already aware where they have data, if they have we have concerns over how they process data, at which point we may have a closer relationship with them as we try and guide them through making sure that they remain within the legislation or working through to provide advice on an ongoing basis. Others we may never have heard of before and may have to establish an entirely new relationship. And then there's the ones in the middle, obviously, where they're not ones that we have to guide through things and help with their data protection practices, and not ones where they're completely new, and we'd treat them all as appropriate, but the broad steps of the process are the same, yeah.
So coming back to, because I help people to solve their problems in lots of different ways. So I'm just happy that there is this other window is opened with getting the remedies through this. But I know that you say they can make a claim through the courts, but I think the ICO should do that on their behalf, especially if they've found the breach. They should then be able to say give them this amount of money through the courts separately to the fines.
So we have covered that. I would recommend putting that in as a complaint ourselves. And I am sorry to rush you off the phone here. I have given you all the advice I believe I'm able to give.
Thank you.
You have other callers that I need to advise.
Sure. Okay, I understand. Thank you, Corey. Thanks for your time.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.